Why do you think we've had, and I think this is great, by the way, because I get scared of this sometimes, but we've had the nuke for over 80 years now. The world has. And after we got it with the Manhattan Project and Nagasaki and Hiroshima happened, obviously other governments around the world were able to develop it and more got it over the years. Why do you think through all the chaos, all the disagreements, all the despots, all the tyrannies, everything that's existed geopolitically around the world in those 80 years, the one thing that even the craziest people have never done, at least that we know of, is hit that button?
Game theory.
Yeah.
So just mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Right. And this is like, you seen like the Beautiful Mind movie.
Yeah, with Russell Crowe.
Yeah. That whole science was, the primary purpose of it was to game or prevent nuclear war and make sure that we weren't, actually a crazy story about that. So we were constantly during the 80s. So there's a concept called the nuclear triad, right? Mm-hmm. Where we want to make sure that we're able to deliver a second strike capability in case we're surprised by a first nuclear event, right? So the strategic nuclear triad is, you have SLBMs, right? Submarine launched ballistic missiles. You have submarines around the world. Then you have the SAC, Strategic Air Command, I think, right? Where you have strategic bombers that are flying around constantly in case something happens. And then you have ICBMs, right? So intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? That capability. So my thesis advisor when I was at the Kennedy School was Dr. Ash Carter. He ultimately became Secretary of Defense in the Biden administration. But when he was younger, he was working in the DOD, and he's working for Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger. And they were looking at other transportation modes to ensure the survivability of the nuclear deterrent. So he looked at everything. And one of the craziest things he looked at, I'm just saying this because he just walked in the room one day and he just like blurted this out, and we're like, what the fuck? So they looked at putting these things. MX missiles, right? So MX missiles that had like a MIRV on the end, which is multiple independent reentry vehicle. So like I think Minuteman IIIs maybe at the time, which is you launch the missile and then it separates into multiple nukes that are independently target.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things that they looked at was putting these things on airships, or in other words, Goodyear blimps.
Yeah.
So
I don't like that.
It seems like a really bad idea.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's even worse than you think it is. So, he did his due diligence and called like the Goodyear Blimp company. And they're like how safe are these things? And they're just like, well, every year we collect hundreds of rounds of like rifle rounds because Bubba's sitting on his porch in like rural Ohio. And it's just like, I think I can hit it. Right. And yeah, they take shots at these things. So obviously, as far as I know, we didn't.
Imagine what Abdullah's doing when they fly over.
So obviously it was they ruled it out. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, I hope so. Jesus Christ.
Anyway, so where was I going with this? What were we talking about?
Well,
before?
we were talking about Epstein.
Yeah.
And we were coming back to that. And I don't want to lead question you here because I want to see if you're going somewhere without me saying. But what was the context of you talking about him?
Just a layer of control.
Oh, yes. Okay, so before I get to what I'm thinking of, I agree with you that he is almost like a door into the house rather than the house itself.
Right.
And I've cited a lot of times what Tucker Carlson said about there being like a supra government. I think he's spot on with that. And it's like, for people who haven't heard me say this a million times, it's like the layer we used to think was the top, which is like the president and the most powerful heads of states and the most powerful heads of industry around the world, is actually layer 3. And above them are 2, billionaire and gazillionaire classes. At the top, you have your silent banking families and stuff like that who really actually pull the strings. You mentioned the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, families like this. And then in between them, you have a fixer class of elite, very wealthy billionaire individuals who work for those people and basically are the messengers to the real people below who are the figureheads. And so the way I've always looked at it is Jeffrey Epstein was just a rich Mike Ehrmantraut. Walter White thought he was fucking in control of everything. Then Mike Ehrmantraut would roll up in a Lincoln Town car, listen to Walter White rant for 30 minutes, slap him like a bitch, and remind him who the boss was. But Mike Ehrmantraut wasn't the top of it. He had to go report to Gus Fring and other guys who were really, really running things. And I think you're right about that with respect to Epstein, because it's like, okay, here's this awful guy, sex trafficker, obviously pedophile, arms dealer, fucking currency hunter, you name it. He's doing all these different things. But like, it's not just he wasn't seeing all the money coming from that. Where's it all going?
Oh, this is survivorship bias, right?
Survivorship bias.
Yeah. So people assume, I mean, it's just like with like UAP abductions alleged, right?
Uh-huh.
Like there are a lot of people that just disappear. All we're seeing is the people that come back.
Right.
Right. So same, and I won't go on that route, but same thing with Epstein. We're only seeing like what's been like the person that screwed up, right? He messed up. He wasn't very good at what he was doing, right?
Yeah.
We think he was good at what he was doing, but he got caught, right? How many people didn't get caught, right? So I think that there is this level of control that we don't see, because if you look at the symptoms or the outcomes that's coming out of this, right? If you try to put a rational spin on them, right, none of it makes any fucking sense, right? So just take the events of the last 5 years, for instance, right? So globally, you have this massive aging population with the baby boomers, right, which threatens to destabilize kind of the economies of the world because they have to be supported by fewer and fewer workers, okay? At the same time, you also have people consuming a lot more resources. You have AI coming into space at kind of the exact time necessary. You have all these 22 million illegal immigrants seemingly flooding into the country. Mm-hmm. You have, without going into it, you can probably surmise what I'm talking about, psychological sterilizations.
Psychological sterilizations.
You convince people to do things to themselves so that they can't have children, right? Yeah. Everything is based on, all this stuff kind of drives toward one conclusion, and that's depopulation in some sense.
Yeah.
Okay? You had kind of mRNA, I'll just leave it at that, right? That just comes just at the right time. And also it comes at a time when you need all these data centers that are going to increasingly drain power from the grid, and you're going to have to choose between AIs and humans, right? You're also going to, you're going to have a huge restive population that doesn't have jobs, right? And it's not like the people at the bottom, it's the people who can plot and make things happen.
Yes.
Right? Well, how do you handle that? How are you going to be ready for that? And do you see our political class like proactively coming up with any solutions for this other than what you are seeing kind of happen in real time? Like, why do you import all these people? So you can drive wages down and, get rid of the population that, consumes more resources. That's why it happened in the United States and not China.
And that's
right?
And what's crazy is when you look over the past 30 years, I'll just leave it at that.
Again, pure spec.
Right? I think there's a lot on there that you have a lot of data for, though, to prove it. But like with just the immigration thing, when you look at the past 30 years, this is something that at different points, the Republicans and Democrats have been at fault for in ways. And obviously the parties change over time and the figureheads and stuff like that change over time. But it feels very, very coordinated in that way because they also make the regular immigration system so broken. So they incentivize that to happen.
Well, just take the latest like Iran war. Like what are the downstream impacts of that going to be?
Crazy.
Well, like 25% of U.S. farmers don't have the fertilizer, particularly nitrogen-based fertilizer that they're going to need for the harvest in the fall, right? So what's going to happen with that? Well, you're going to have the United States. It won't necessarily. It all depends on how the summer goes, right? If you have a dry summer, it could be really bad, right? So in the United States, it'll probably manifest itself by just even more food inflation, things like that. But, probably enough to have people kind of creeping into other people's homes to try to find food. It could get really bad. You're going to have other places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, kind of areas in Africa where there's going to be mass starvation, right? Just because you're tweaking
Yes.
I mean, otherwise the war doesn't make any goddamn sense.
No.
Right? And again, like I did my master's thesis on this fucking thing 20 years ago.